This is going to be so much fun.
I need therapy after watching this movie.
I did. Yeah. I went to bed and Matt said, "Hope you feel better."
she looked like she was suffering from COVID.
Shell shock.
Like she looked run down.
I was so emotionally devoid.
Yeah, like she just had this blank stare on her face.
He was like, "Do you still love me?" I was like, "I don't think I love anything."
Wedding's off.
Yeah, apparently she's allergic to the ring, so.
Go live with Peter Jackson if you like it so well.
Maybe I will.
And his stupid hobbits is...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into it.
Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast. I am your host, the Salty Nerd. And today's episode, we are going to be discussing some classic movies all about, or I guess not all about, but that have aliens in them. That's our theme for this week is aliens.
It has aliens in them.
In the movie.
Yeah.
There's aliens.
It's very loosely themed.
Well, ironically, this week's movie selections, they're all from some of my favorite directors of all time.
Yeah.
So that's also a nice running thread. Like when I was looking at the list of movies that we chose to watch this week, I was just like, oh man, these are from like my all-time favorite directors.
This is great, except for one. All right, well, I am joined by my illustrious co-host, starting with the barbarian himself, MattVader, 74. What's up, buddy?
Not a lot, man.
Good morning.
Whiskers are a little longer.
Yeah, mine too.
And I'm still half asleep.
Yeah.
Because we do this in the morning now for some reason. I guess that's my fault, huh?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
The only loser had to go back to work.
Well, I didn't get off work till 2 a.m, so it sucks.
Well, he was up.
Oh, yeah. He's like, hey, you guys, quit talking about the movies. Talk about it in the morning.
Like 2:30 in the morning.
Save it for the podcast, jerks.
I'm a night owl. What can I say?
And I'm also joined by the ambassador of estrogen, Jude. What's up?
Hey, sweetheart. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Are you feeling better? You recovered from this movie yet?
I don't know. I've been dreading this talk. I started just talking about my feelings this morning, and Kadish said, save it for the pod.
And speaking of Kadish, the man who started it all, Matthew Kadish, author extraordinaire.
What exactly did I start?
You started
Our loathing and contempt for you.
I now know that no matter what theme I choose, you will ruin it.
That's my goal with this podcast. Ruin everything you guys love.
That is a thing, isn't it?
It is now.
It's like you can't even pick fucking monsters and robot movies right.
We're going to have to come up with some rules.
No more student films with budgets less than $1,000.
No more student films is a great rule.
That's a great rule. I like that rule. All right, before we get too deep into the woods on this, I wanted to remind everybody that's listening that you can go to saltynerdclub.com. That takes you straight to our Patreon page. We have several different tiers that you can choose from, each with their own rewards. You can choose whichever one you want to help support this great podcast and a bunch of friends talking about movies. And you can also get in contact with us and request movies. Like the last week, we did Eurovision for one of our top patrons, Hasboy, over there in Australia. And, just be part of the community. Join us. Join the discussion. That's saltynerdclub.com, and you can help support a fun podcast. All right, starting.
I'm looking at kitty pictures on Instagram just to calm my nerves right now.
That's kitty.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to make that clear.
Be very clear.
Cats.
I like
Feline.
whatever. You guys think that. That's fine. That's okay.
Wow. So just to let everybody know, our discussion topics for today are Predator, the original, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers from 1987. Get to the chopper.
You son of a bitch.
I'm here. Kill me.
Sexual Tyrannosaurus. I wore this shirt
Well, you
because of that.
you just took all the good lines. I did. You're a jerk. I'm done.
I can't say the first half of that
Get to the
line.
chopper.
It's against the rules now.
You could tell the joke.
The joke?
Yeah.
The Hawkins jokes.
Oh yeah. God, I gotta. I'm still half asleep. I'll get there.
We're also going to be discussing Starship Troopers from 1997. For me, the movie stars Michael Ironside. I don't really know who else is in the movie except for him.
It's got like 2 lines.
He's the best character in that movie.
He is.
All right. We're also talking. This is Kadish's pick, Bad Taste from 1987.
It's rough, guys.
One of the first I guess one of the first Peter Jackson movies?
The first Peter Jackson movie. This is the movie that put Oscar-winning director Peter Jackson on the map.
That's crazy.
Which really goes to show you, like, not
how low the standards are.
Not everyone just started off making 10s out of 10s, because this is a 0 out of 10.
I'm surrounded by Philistines.
I don't know.
Philistines.
I've been holding back my opinion on this. You might be surprised by the end of this podcast.
He has saved it for the pod.
Yes. All right. Well, let's get started then. Bad Taste, 1987. Matthew
We're
Kadish.
doing this one first.
Yes, we have to. I want to talk about this movie. All right, starting with Matthew Kadish's pick for this week's topic is Bad Taste, the Peter Jackson movie, the first Peter Jackson movie ever made, apparently. Mm-hmm. And Kadish, why don't you tell us about this movie and tell us why you picked it? It seems like you have a pretty...
I have a special connection to this
movie. Special connection to this movie. So why don't you tell us about that?
So this is a movie about a small town in New Zealand that gets invaded by AIDS. And that stands for the Astro Investigation and Defense Service. And they keep saying they need a better name. But basically, a group of aliens kind of kills the entire population of this small town. So the population disappears, and the AIDS boys are sent in to investigate it. And they discover these aliens, which you can spot because of their blue shirts, the alien uniform. Running around town, basically harvesting human beings in order to create food for an intergalactic fast food chain that they are shipping like human corpses off planet to basically fund in a kind of McDonald's versus Burger King war in outer space.
Which puts the phrase, I'm a snack, in a whole new perspective.
I gotta say, I didn't get any of that out of this movie, but okay, keep going.
It's just because you were trying to get through it. I get it.
Didn't.
So I have a very special kind of relationship with this movie because there was a time in high school where I had decided that I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I got really into the Evil Dead movies. Like Evil Dead 2 was kind of the inspiration for me to kind of move into directing and wanting to do like low budget kind of movies with my friends that, had special effects and makeup effects and stuff like that. And so I got really into kind of the schlocky horror comedy stuff because at the time, horror was kind of like where you could do low budget stuff and actually get noticed doing it. So I went to the video store one day and I asked the store clerk, I was like, hey, are there any movies out there like Evil Dead 2? And he's like, well, have you ever heard of Peter Jackson? And I was like, no. He's like, he's been doing a lot of really cool movies out of New Zealand. He's got this movie called Dead Alive and Bad Taste. And I was like, oh, okay, well, show them to me. I want to rent them. And so I watched both these movies and they were fantastic. They were exactly what I was looking for. And like me and my friends, when we'd have like sleepovers and stuff like that, we'd watch these movies and we'd laugh our butts off. And I would study these movies like they were the Zapruder film, like I'd go frame by frame on some of them. I'd immerse myself into like all the information I could get about the making of them. And what made them so special was that Peter Jackson, like he was like a complete unknown at the time. Like he had just, like by the time I got into him, he had just finished his third or fourth movie called Heavenly Creatures, which was a movie that kind of put Kate Winslet on the map. And that led to her getting her role in Titanic and stuff. But he had made like 3 really schlocky movies before this. The first one was Bad Taste. The second one was Meet the Feebles, which is a kind of adult puppet movie. And, it's got like puppets doing like drugs and doing incredibly violent things and stuff like that. And then there was Dead Alive. And the story behind Bad Taste is just so fascinating to me. And I know that you guys watched it as like a consumer of movies, which I guess is kind of the normal way to do it. But I watch it as like a filmmaker looking at a movie.
There's a big difference between those two things.
There is a big difference, but I think that this movie appeals to a very certain kind of niche audience because like the horror movie audience, with the exception being Jude, like loves this movie.
That is not true.
And it is very like gross. Like it's not a very it's incredibly gory. In fact, it got banned in Australia for being so gory when it came out. But the story behind the making of this movie is just fascinating to me because it was Peter Jackson's first movie. It started off as a short film that he was going to make just to test out this new 16 millimeter film camera that he had bought used. It was a Bolex 16 millimeter film camera. And if anyone's ever gone to film school, you'll know what a Bolex is. It was like the film cameras that they used in World War II that were just indestructible, and they were hand cranked. They didn't require any like batteries or anything like that. And he just had this single camera, and he started filming this short film with his friends. And he had so much footage, he was like, I could probably make a feature out of this. And so he shot this movie over the course of 4 years.
God damn.
On the weekends with his friends.
Some dedication.
But like the stuff that he was doing at the time was so off the wall and outside the box, and it was really innovative because like he built his own dolly system, he built his own crane. He built his own Steadicam, like his counterweighted Steadicam was something that he just like threw together with like a dumbbell weight and like a stick and stuff. and like, so like he did all the special effects himself, all like the creature effects, all the gore effects. There was not a single real gun in this movie. Like all the guns were made from aluminum pipes and wood.
I noticed that several of the guns were actually the same ones that George Lucas used in Star Wars for the Stormtrooper rifles. It's the same gun, except for George Lucas just made a few modifications, but Peter Jackson used the same one. I can't remember the model of it. Well,
he molded the guns to look like real guns, but for the most part, like all the stuff in this movie is fake, and they did it in post. And it was a one-man crew. It was like Peter Jackson with his camera, and they didn't record sound while they were shooting.
No, I could tell that.
So
I could definitely tell.
All the dialogue and stuff in the movie was dubbed in afterwards. And it was funny because Peter Jackson self-financed this movie up to a certain point. Like he spent $26,000 of his own money, and they got about 2/3 of the way through the movie. And then he went to the New Zealand Film Commission and showed them what he had done. And they were like, well, no one's doing anything like this in New Zealand. So here's $230,000 to finish the movie. And you can tell at the point where he got that money because stuff starts blowing up.
Yeah.
and the creature effects, like he did all the plaster molds and then the latex sculpting, and in the movie the aliens' heads are all like kind of sloped backwards.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because he had to bake the latex in his mother's oven. And that was the only way that the heads would fit into the oven, is if the heads were like kind of like sloped back to because like when you pushed it in, it hit the top of the oven. And I mean, it's kind of funny because at one point there's a character, I forget his name, but he's the guy with like the walrus mustache who's like at the beginning. I think his name was Barry. And like that guy over the course of the 4-year shoot got married to a new wife who was like super religious, and she wouldn't allow him to shoot on weekends, because on Sundays she was like, you can't do anything because that's for church. And so there's a part where like his character just kind of disappears from the movie, and it's because like his wife refused to let him do it. And then like in addition to that, over the course of that 4 years, he also got divorced from her, and that's when he comes back into the movie.
Things you wouldn't notice.
Yeah, but like the whole movie was shot with like natural light. Like Peter Jackson like didn't light any of the scenes. Like it's kind of funny because if you look at some of the interior shots, like you can tell they just threw up like a spotlight just to get the exposure, because like there's like harsh shadows, like nothing's lit very well. This movie looks like shit.
Yeah.
But the camera angles and stuff were very kind of inspired by Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, and so like there was like a lot of like really innovative filmmaking techniques going on here. And the interesting thing about this movie is that when it was finished and it got the backing from the New Zealand Film Commission, it went to the Cannes Film Festival in 1987, something like that. It was either 87 or 88. And it kind of got this like huge, like tons of attention at the Cannes Film Festival. And it sold all of its like foreign territory rights like instantly. And it went out across the world and created this big cult following, which led Peter Jackson to, make his next movies. And it's kind of funny because without bad taste, like we wouldn't have gotten Lord of the Rings. We wouldn't have gotten Weta Studios, which is the special effects house that Peter Jackson started. I mean, it's second only to ILM in terms of the industry in special effects. So like Bad Taste was kind of the impetus. It was the thing that launched his career, and eventually led to, I believe, Robert Zemeckis saw both that and Dead Alive, which led Peter Jackson to getting hired to do The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. And once he did that movie, that led him to get the Lord of the Rings films, in addition to King Kong. There's a lot that cinema history kind of owes to this movie. In fact, I want to point out to you guys before you start trashing it that it's rated as the 416th best film of all time.
Wow.
Based on a survey of industry professionals and film fans.
Rigged.
So just know that before you
That's
start
because
bashing
people who vote for those kind of things are people like you.
Yes.
Look at this polished piece of shit and go, ooh, this is significant in the history of movie.
But I wanted to just say that when Peter Jackson won his Academy Award for directing The Lord of the Rings. So yeah, in his acceptance speech for his Oscars, so Jackson mentioned that, he mentioned both Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles, which were his early movies, and he kind of said that the Academy had that those movies had been wisely overlooked by the Academy up to that point. So like he knows like that these movies aren't high art.
Yeah.
And in fact, Bad Taste, it might shock you guys to know this, Bad Taste didn't have a script.
What?
Shocker.
Yeah, so basically the way it worked was Peter Jackson throughout the week, he'd just think of stuff that he wanted to shoot, like cool stuff. And then on the weekend, he'd shoot it. And then the whole process would start over again. And then he would kind of try to assemble it in the editing room.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep,
Yeah.
spot on.
All right, so let's go around the table. I'm going to start with you because you didn't even finish this movie.
I don't have a whole lot to say about
I know,
this
that's
movie.
why I'm picking you first.
It's just
At what point did you tap out?
I tapped out when the dude fell off the cliff.
Oh, and it was
That was
When Derek
Yeah,
Within the
no,
first 15 minutes.
It's about 25 minutes in because I looked and I said,
nope.
I'm
love that
gonna
scene.
drive over to Matt's house and verbally accost him violently. But no, I didn't even do that. But no, I just couldn't do it. It was just
Not your bag, huh?
not my thing.
Not even worth like.
It's like, oh, we're getting our special effects out of toothpaste tubes now, and it's just like, forget it. I just
Yeah.
I can't
it was
do
the
this.
80s.
oh man, it got so much worse.
Oh, I know. I have a buddy named Lee who was into early Peter Jackson stuff, and he loved all those movies that you just rattled off. And what was the third one he made?
Dead Alive.
Dead Alive.
Yeah, he always tried to get me to watch that. And isn't there a scene in there where like some guy straps a lawnmower to his chest and like destroys everybody?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, and I just he showed me that, and I'm like, nope. I can't do it.
It's the best part of that movie.
Yeah.
Like instead of a chainsaw, and it's funny because like this movie had such a influence on other filmmakers. Like for instance, the inspiration for this movie was the original Evil Dead by Sam Raimi, and there's a scene in the movie where one of the characters gets like this big red chainsaw and he starts running around cutting aliens apart. And if you look at Evil Dead 2, which was kind of filming after this movie came out, Sam Raimi uses
What's a big chainsaw in the movie?
an exact replica of that chainsaw to give Ash. And so it was kind of like, well, I influenced you, so I'm going to give you a nod in
That's
my
cool.
movie.
I'm not going to lie. That is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, but the whole lawnmower thing in Dead Alive is another movie I'd love to talk to you guys about.
God.
But yeah, like this guy picks up just like this lawnmower with the spinning blades, and he just starts killing zombies left and right with it, just like putting it on top of zombies, and it's like a blender, and they
Eat
just
my
go,
spinning steel, shithead.
and there's a priest.
Wow, you actually remembered a
I
line
do.
from the movie.
Jude, you might hate me after the end of this little discussion here. Let's go to you next, though, because you have some strong feelings about this movie. So
Yes, tell us about
your experience of watching Bad Taste. She wrote them down.
You can totally edit this out if you want to, but it's just
Just try not to read it. Just like say it naturally. That's the only thing.
okay.
Put it in a full sentence.
Okay. It's gonna read like a diary entry.
That's exactly what I don't want.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You can edit me out
Do
then.
your thing. Do your thing.
I need to get this out of my
Go
body.
ahead. Go ahead. This is now therapy for Jude.
Dear diary, Okay. At 5 minutes in, I wrote, I pray for death. This is
5
exhausting.
minutes.
This is exhausting. That's exactly right.
What did I do to make Matt do this to me?
You wrote these down while you were watching it?
Yes. It's taking all of my willpower to keep my eyes on the screen, and I feel like this is an endurance test. This reminds me of an Adult Swim show, but not funny and so much longer. I found my glasses on the couch and I almost put them back on, but then I thought, nah. I'm only halfway through.
This movie is so long.
It's an hour and a half.
No, it felt like...
No. Matt just handed me a piece of barbecue to taste immediately after the pass the bull scene. What is wrong with him? I don't want to do the podcast anymore. I don't want eyes anymore. I wish I'd started drinking harder earlier. I regret everything in my life that has led me here. I swear I've been watching this movie for at least 2 hours. Will I ever know joy again?
Oh my God.
Why is this still playing? I feel nothing. Those are my show notes.
I thought she was sick last night.
Yeah.
Before she went to bed because she seemed so like just dead inside.
I was.
Everything you just wrote down would make a great T-shirt. And I felt the exact same way.
You only made it.
But I just tapped out. I
25
said,
minutes and you tapped
done.
out. I felt like it was a relationship test. And I was like, no, I have to go through and I have to be loyal. I stand by my man. And when I got through, I was like, it wasn't worth it.
To be completely honest with you guys, I thought this was a 2-hour movie. And then he just told me that it was an hour and a half. And I'm like, no. No. This was 2 hours easily. It felt like...
Hour and a half, 45 minutes.
It felt like a Lord of the Rings movie, like director's cut.
Yep.
Like it was so long.
Yep. I felt like I was in purgatory and that this was just going to be how it is now.
Okay.
when I saw the guys walking around at the beginning of the movie, talking to each other through their walkie-talkies that they have duct taped and stuff attached to their shoulders, I'm like, this is the worst. I mean, I made it like 30 seconds in, and I'm like, what is this?
I saw the screenshot on Amazon Prime, just the picture of the alien holding a gun, and I was like, oh shit.
Well, that's better.
I was like, I don't want to do this. And then I started watching it. And have you
What?
finished your...
Yes. Have you purged enough?
I feel better now.
Okay, good. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do my thing.
Yeah, do it.
So I saw the screenshot and immediately was like, oh man, not again. Especially since last week we had the same thing with that Monster Squad terrible movie, which I got a lot of hate for not liking that movie.
That movie is
'cause
at
it's
least
great.
funny.
I disagree.
I think Bad Taste is hilarious.
Oh yeah, he was chuckling
I was sitting there
through
laughing
the whole thing,
while she's
and I was
almost
just
she's trying to hold back tears.
every time he chuckled, I was like, "Who is this?
This is the film nerd.
This
Who
is a
is
funny
this?
movie.
Who
This is
is
a
this
film nerd.
man sitting next to me?"
So I started watching the movie and I was in line with you two. I'm like, oh my God, this is so bad. And then I started watching it and I'm like looking at the people and actors and I'm like, that guy looks really familiar. Who is that? I'm like, is that like a young Peter Jackson or something? I had no idea. I haven't seen Peter Jackson, like his face in a while.
He hasn't come over recently.
Yeah, he hasn't hanged out with me very much, but I was like, I can't, is that really him? And then you texted me, yeah, it's a Peter Jackson movie, and that's him. And I'm like,
Yeah, he played 2 different roles.
yeah.
He played Derek, and
Didn't he play
played
3
Robert
different roles?
No,
He played Robert the alien zombie dude, and he played Derek,
Yeah, and
which is the
there are lots of people in this movie that look like him.
No, but
Must be
there's
the New
a
Zealand thing.
credit in the IMDb where he's also the minister.
Well, he played the voice on the kind of phone box at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, okay. So finding out that it was a Peter Jackson film and that he was in it kind of shifted gears for me a little bit, because I was no longer watching it as a consumer who was just like, oh, I want to watch a fun movie. When he told me it was Peter Jackson, I was like, God, this movie's shit. And you're like, no, this is Peter Jackson's first movie. I was like, oh, okay. Now I'm in the right headspace.
Well, aren't you fancy?
And I started enjoying the movie.
You're a sellout.
I was like, hold on a sec. No, because I was watching it. I'm like, okay, so forget all of the terrible, terrible low budget effects. Forget the terrible, terrible sound editing, because this is somebody just doing this in their spare time as a passion project. That changes my perception of what the movie is. So I'm no longer watching it for like just purely entertainment. Now I'm watching it as somebody who would
feel like
one day want to make a movie.
I feel like your TikTok videos are better made than this thing.
They are. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So
The look he just gave me is precious.
So when I found that out, and then I started watching the movie in that context, I started noticing some of these special effects. And I was like, oh shit, that guy actually had to make a fake head like 17 different times to get this shot.
There are no like stuntmen.
Yeah, there's
like they're all doing their own like hanging off cliffs.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. All right, cool. That's pretty, I mean, that would take a lot of effort to do that. And then to film it just for like one shot in the movie, that's all right. That's dedication. I get it.
And it was all Peter Jackson.
Yeah. And then I saw a couple of scenes, like some cinematic shots that are awful, just plain awful. But they give you a precursor of his future work. And I started seeing scenes and I'm like one of the things that stood out to me the most was the scene where the blood drips down on the guy's eyeglasses. It's terribly done. But I'm like, if you had a bigger budget and maybe a better camera and you did some kind of like funky, editing with that, I could see that being in like a horror movie where somebody's with the angle just right and the lighting perfectly and a droplet of blood lands on the guy's eyeglasses. I was like, oh, that would be a cool shot if it was done like legit, not just like a, film student thing. So I started seeing stuff like that. And then by the end of the movie, which you didn't even get to, by the end of the movie where he got that budget apparently, which is,
yeah,
I'm like, wow, this got better.
Yeah. Like the entire third act of this movie is just like one big long action.
Yeah. It's fun. It's like, I love the fact that they blew up the house and I'm like, oh, there's the forced perspective thing from Lord of the Rings where he makes everybody look smaller and taller. And I'm like, that's the first time he ever used that. Cause that's obviously a model of that house. Obviously, pretty well done model too.
Yeah, really well done. And all Peter Jackson.
Yeah. He built that model?
He was the model maker. He was the special.
So there's
he was he was inspired by Tom Savini in terms of he wanted to do all the makeup effects.
Yeah.
He was the prop master. He created all the props for the, like it was his cars that they were using and stuff like that. Like everything in this movie was Peter. He was literally a one-man movie studio.
So there's in this movie, there's a house, which I'll explain to you because you didn't get that far.
I don't care.
There's this house, right? With all the aliens are kind of like hubbed in, and apparently it's a spaceship. I didn't really buy that, but whatever. And they're inside this house, and it's a real house in the beginning of the movie. We're like halfway through the movie where we get introduced to this set piece. It's a real house. It must be somebody's mom's house or something that they were like, hey, can we used to shoot in your living room? Like totally. Okay, go ahead. And then what happens later on is somebody gets a rocket launcher and they shoot it at this house. Obviously, they're not going to blow up a real house, but they used a model and he used forced perspective to make it look like the full-size house, and then he blew it up. And I'm like, oh, that's neat. Like to me, I was just like, okay, I get it. That's pretty cool. He used a camera trick to make the little tiny model house look big, and then he blew it up with a firecracker. Like, all right, cool. I get it. That's legit. Like, that sounds fun. Like, if Kadish was like, hey, I'm shooting a short film. You want to come over and blow up this model? I'm like, yeah, I do.
Let's do it.
Hell yeah, I do. That sounds awesome. So, like, when my perception of this movie changed and I found out what it was, I was able to enjoy it much more than I did the first half. I still hate the first half. This, to me, feels like a typical Peter Jackson movie where it's like an hour too long. And it's like you could have just cut a lot of this, like the whole beginning segment where they're chasing around and the aliens are chasing them through the town and they're like hanging off the cliff. I'm like, this is it drags the movie a lot, like a lot. So I feel like that could be edited down to like maybe a 45-minute little short film and it would be dope, because the third act was actually kind of fun.
No, it wasn't.
And it was so over the top gory.
Oh, and hilarious. Like, I love the humor in this.
I did chuckle. I chuckled a handful of times. Some of the lines that the guys said to each other, I was like, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, but it's also like little things. Like, for instance, there's a scene where Peter Jackson's character Derek is assaulting the alien homestead with a chainsaw. And this is already after it had been blown up by the RPG.
And it cuts a perfectly shaped hole out of the wall.
Yeah, so like there's like broken windows and doors that he could go through, but instead he runs up and starts sawing through a wall with his chainsaw, and he saws out like a perfectly Derek-shaped
silhouette
with like with his chainsaw.
Yeah. It was very Evil Dead.
Yeah, it falls down. And he just steps through it. But there's also things like
and you can see that the wall that he steps into
cut.
Is cardboard.
Is cardboard. Yeah.
And
don't watch this movie.
There's a scene where like they try to shoot the head boss, who's Lord Crumb.
All the names are freaking hilarious.
And they try to shoot him with another RPG, and the RPG like goes through like the big gaping hole in the house, past Lord Crumb and past like the hole that Derek cut in the wall.
It goes through and all the way out the other side.
And so it passes right through the house, and it blows up a random sheep. And it's just like there's the shot of the sheep, and it's just like, and then all of a sudden it's like boom.
Yeah, it's just this little poor animal just blows up.
Oh, it's hilarious.
It is pretty. I did chuckle at that point.
If you watch this movie and you get to that point in the movie, your sense of humor will have already left your body, and it's not worth it.
I don't know. Like so there was a scene where the AIDS boys break into the alien house for the first time, and they find like this room that's just like full of blood, and one of them like almost slips, and he's like, "Oh my god, this is dangerous!
Somebody's got to clean this up." He grabs a mop,
and he grabs a mop and he starts mopping up all the blood on the floor, and then another alien comes in and kind of surprises them. So like they tackle the guy. And
they rip his head off.
The aliens, like they accidentally rip his head off, and blood starts squirting everywhere from the neck. And the guy's like, Barry's like, "Oh man, I just cleaned that up." And then they
these guys have complete straight faces,
and then they like step on the severed head's spine and rip it off, and then kick the head out the window to get rid of it. And I mean, it's like,
wasn't it still talking?
Yeah, its mouth was still moving.
It didn't die.
Yeah, and so like it's little things like that. Like for instance, like in the third act of the movie, the aliens, who you can always tell who the aliens are based off of their blue shirts.
Yeah.
Denim. They switch,
aliens wear denim.
Yeah, they switch from their human form to their alien form. And so like because the alien bodies are like so much bigger, they kind of rip through the clothes, and every alien's butt rips out of the back of his jeans, and you just see these alien butts running around for like the last act of this movie.
Hey Derek, he looks like a pot-bellied dickhead. I chuckled. They say funny things in this movie, guys.
They really do if you pay attention to it and you're not dead inside while you're watching it.
Good one, babe.
You know what's interesting is that the last time I saw this movie, it was before Peter Jackson had made the Lord of the Rings movies. And in rewatching it, for this podcast this week, I was watching the action scenes and I was like, this is the guy who filmed the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at like the first incarnation of his kind of action chops, because like there's a lot of violence in this movie.
Oh,
You got gunplay, you've got knives, you've got people like fighting with hammers and axes, and and it's not. I mean, it's very obvious that some of it is.
There was a scene where one of the aliens is handing out hammers to a bunch of other aliens.
Yeah,
and
just one after the other.
It's so obvious that they just reused the same cut of the guy lifting up the hammer, and they just edited it so it looked like more than one person was grabbing a hammer. I was like, wow, that is some low budget, like cheap effects.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of creativity in this movie in terms of like how it had to be like made. But if you watch the action scenes, like obviously there are some parts where it's kind of like, well, that's the best you can do on the low budget. But for the most part, like, watching the action scene, like they had squibs, they had, muzzle flashes on the guns.
Just the amount of gore almost, I would say, rivals a Tarantino movie at some points. Like there was so much gore, like heads getting split in half.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, once the chainsaw came out, it was just like
at the very end when Derek does the dive through Lord Crumb's head.
Eat my spinning steel, dickhead.
And like actually like goes through his body and comes out like a baby. And he's like, and he breaks the fourth wall, looks at camera. And he's like, I'm born again.
It's so bad.
It's terrible, but it's hilarious.
It is. I did chuckle.
In its excess. Like I can totally understand why Jude and Vader did not like this movie, because it's not a movie for everyone.
No, it's not.
But when you look at it from the point of view of independent cinema and like filmmaking and the very first movie of this guy who's gone on to be arguably one of the greatest filmmakers of our generation, it's a fascinating movie.
It really is. It really is. I did once I was able to shift gears about halfway through the movie when it actually started getting good, and apparently he got a better budget and like the action started stepping up and it felt like a faster movie. I was like, okay, I'm in. I got it. I understand what this is. I understand why he picked it, and I can appreciate it for that. So, final thoughts on this movie, Matthew Kadish. What else you got?
I love this movie. Like it, I have a big nostalgia, like kind of bias towards this film, but it was also such an inspiration for me, like kind of growing up and wanting to be a filmmaker, and kind of learning how to do guerrilla cinema.
Guerrilla cinema.
Yeah, like just stuff that you can do cheap and low budget, and yourself. Peter Jackson I was a big fan of his even before he got cool, so like I just, this film was such a big part of my film education growing up. And plus it was a film that all my friends and I like love to watch together and just chuckle about, like as it gets ridiculous. And I also think that it's got kind of a Taika Waititi sense of humor to it with that New Zealand kind of Kiwi, very low key humor. Like there's so many great lines in this movie where
I couldn't understand any of them, to be honest with you.
Well, we had the subtitles on.
I had this. Oh, that's the thing. I forgot to mention. I was watching it with subtitles on, and the description for the music was hilarious. It was like slightly
synthesizer.
Yeah, slightly ominous synthesizer. It was goofy.
Yeah, but it's like, why do we have to wear these ninja masks? And it's like, oh, they're to protect our identities. No, stupid. It's so we can kill civilians and not get in trouble.
All right, final thoughts, Vader. What do you want to say to the people?
I don't have any final thoughts on this movie.
Jude, what about you?
I feel like I would have enjoyed a documentary about this movie more than having to sit through this movie and decipher Kadish's love for this movie.
That's fair. I think that's fair.
And what's weird is Jude loves really terrible horror movies. So like,
this was a bit too much, apparently.
Yeah, I thought that she might at least appreciate it on that level.
So it has come to my attention that Kadish doesn't understand me or know me at all. I do love B horror movies. And when we started, so first of all, the day before we watched this movie, we were about to have dinner, and he goes, so I don't really want to watch bad taste while we're eating dinner. And I was like, oh, okay.
It makes total sense now.
And then the next day when we were about to watch it, which was yesterday, he was like, so I just want to warn you, this is very gory. And I looked at him like he was a wacko, because I was like, I don't care.
That scene, the shared bowl scene, made me queasy.
Yeah. That was gross.
That was nasty.
That was gross.
That's the most infamous scene in the film.
God damn.
I never care about
You
gore.
didn't even get there.
I don't do gory movies.
Dude, there was a scene.
I can't watch like, what are those movies with the little puppet? Where he kills everybody, puts them in traps and things.
Oh, Chucky?
Child's Play.
No.
Saw.
Oh, okay.
I can't do those.
Yeah, the gore porn?
Yeah, I just don't do it.
Yeah,
don't
so
either.
I never care about that. I don't care. It's
Please don't make me watch that.
somewhat.
Don't worry, I won't.
I mean, stuff like that is like comical to me. Like a B movie is
Yeah.
so funny to me because it's so awesomely bad. This was just bad. And that's the difference. I don't care if it's gory as long as there's something redeeming about it that I can get out of it, where it's either a good story or there's something funny that I can laugh about. There was zero involved in this that I could walk away from and being like, that was time well spent. This was just a terrible, terrible, life-sucking, soul-draining, time swallower of a movie.
It's kind of weird in my head because I'm thinking about it in my brain right now, and it's like this movie. I literally felt like they were sticking toothpaste tubes up mannequins' noses and squirting them out the other side and stuff.
I mean, that's pretty much what.
Yeah.
I feel like they were sticking.
But it made me queasy, right? But then I watched another movie, and I'm not trying to segue into Predator right now, but there's the scene where the team that went in before them are like literally skinned and hanging up out of the trees.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me for some reason. It didn't make me feel revulsion or anything at one time at all.
Well, this movie is very gross.
Yeah, maybe it's
like there's a reason why it's called bad taste. So
Yeah, is there any?
In regard to the toothpaste thing that Vader said, I felt like they were sticking tubes of toothpaste in my brain and squeezing my brain out.
Which is ironic considering one of the main characters played by Peter Jackson, he cracks his head open at a certain point.
Oh my God.
And like he loses a part of his brain. And so like he has to pick it up and stuff it back into his head and then like put like a suture around his head to keep his brain from falling out.
He takes his belt off.
Yeah, he takes his belt off and wraps his belt around his head to keep his skull together.
Yeah.
And he keeps losing a piece of his brain at one point, and then he has to pick it up, and it's got like gravel all over it, and he shoves it back in the hole.
Yeah,
That's what made him so badass.
That's what makes it better. And then at a certain point, he accidentally steps on his part of the brain after it falls out of his head again.
Yeah.
So he takes like an alien piece of alien brain and just shoves it in there.
And that's what makes him go bananas.
Yeah, and that's what makes him like a real
Gives him his
badass.
thirst for blood.
There was a point too where
I don't want to talk about this
they had a
anymore.
car that had
The Sergeant Peppers.
the Sergeant Pepper silhouettes in the driver's seat or whatever. It was weird.
The Sergeant Pepper
This movie
vehicle.
was so wacky. It's just
Don't watch it.
that's you guys recommended it all, Jude? No,
No.
Matt, Joe?
Hell no.
No, I
guess if you're like a film student or something and you want to see how Peter
Just
Jackson did his first
Listen
movie.
to our podcast, and that's all you need.
Or if you're a fan of like, goofy horror comedy.
I mean, there is an audience for this out there, and Matt's not the first person I've known that likes this kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
there's an audience
for it.
It's just not me.
Yeah, no, I feel it. All right, well, that was our discussion on bad taste. It's on Amazon Prime for free if you
Don't watch it.
if you so desire.
watch the first 20 minutes like Vader
Just watch
did.
the trailer. That's enough.
See if you can make it through.
Before we move on, I wanted to ask you one thing. At the very end, Derek is inside the spaceship and he's wearing the skin of the alien. Is there like a sequel out there that Peter Jackson
No.
made?
No.
Because he was headed towards Saturn or something at the end, and he was wearing the skin of the alien.
Yeah, they were headed back to the alien homeworld, and Derek, who kind of stowed away on the ship and killed Lord Crumb, put on Lord Crumb's skin. And when the spaceship gets to the alien homeworld, he's just going to kill all the aliens.
I want to see that movie today. I want Peter Jackson to make that movie today with his budget that he has now. That's what my one request.
coming for the bastards.
reprising his role as Derek.
Yes. With the cracked skull and the falling out brain. Like, that's the movie I want to watch. All right. Moving on. Before we do, real quick, audience listening, you can go to saltynerdvideo.com. That takes you straight to our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Help us build our YouTube channel. We have all of our content there, the full-length podcast, as well as taking those podcasts and splitting them up into nice, digestible segments by topic. So go there, hit subscribe, hit the little bell notification, because, just in case YouTube censors us or something. And you can get the notifications for when we drop new videos every week. And we'd appreciate your support. Comment, talk to us, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you think about this movie. And we'll talk to you there.
We always respond when you comment.
Yeah, there's so few people that comment that I'm always like, oh, comment. So hit us up. Moving on, before we lose Vader completely, let's talk about his movie.
You're gonna lose me?
You're lost already.
No, he's just getting in.
Yeah, I'm trying to wake up.
All right, you chose this week the Arnold Schwarzenegger 1987 Predator.
Yeah.
Why did you pick it? Tell us about your
Why?
movie, man. Why did you pick this movie? And
You always ask me this question, and you think I'm going to come up with some deep answer about why I picked this movie.
It took 15 minutes for Kadish to tell us why.
And the theme of the week was alien movies, and I'm like, we can do aliens. Oh, Predator. That's cool. Let's watch Predator because
That's a
that's
good
a cool
movie.
movie.
So it's because it's cool.
because it's cool.
Because the Predator came from outer space. And he's an alien. It's like I didn't put a lot of thought into it. It's just.
Is it like one of your favorite movies?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. It's a great movie. I love it.
Can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah, it's about a predator who comes to the planet Earth, and he's hanging out in the jungle, and there's some CIA Army shenanigans going on in the jungle with gorillas and stuff, and
Russians.
and commies,
Yeah.
and
Carl Weathers is in
they need to do some. They need to get Arnold's special team in there to go under the guise of rescuing somebody when really it's a CIA operation, and to get some information. And,
Some black ops.
They run into
some unexpected resistance from space.
from space.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's like an action movie that turns into a horror movie that just kind of.
It's got everything.
It's got everything.
It does,
in it,
except for boobs.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, no boobs.
No boobs.
But
You
then
chose a movie with no boobs.
I know, it's weird.
It's got some side boob in it.
Kind of. I guess so.
Are they alien side boobs?
No. What did you?
But no, it's when I think 80s action movies, Predators were right there.
Yeah.
It's like classic. It's way up on the list.
Yeah, this is part of what I call the McTiernan trifecta.
Yeah.
Because John McTiernan made 3 perfect movies in his career. One was Die Hard. The other was Hunt for October, and then the Predator. Those are three of the greatest movies ever made, in my opinion, and they were all done back to back by John McTiernan, and then he never made another good movie again. I mean, Die Hard 3 was kind of okay, but
which was the one with Samuel L. Jackson?
that was Die Hard 3.
Yeah,
Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So, Jude, why don't you tell us your thoughts on Predator? Did you like this movie?
Yeah, I like this movie. It's fun. I like the monster in it. I like once we did the Jean-Claude Van Damme week, and when we found out like, oh, he was supposed to be the Predator in this. And so like when we were watching it this time, Kadish was like, hey, picture Jean-Claude Van Damme doing that right now. And it just made me chuckle.
Yeah.
So a little bit, I watched it with a little bit more warmth in my heart this time than I had ever before. But yeah, I love it. I love 80s movies in general, and just that initial "you son of a bitch" handshake with the muscles. I was like, "What's that called?" It's like a bro shake or a muscle like welcoming. What is that?
Jude called it the over the top.
Yeah, that's what I got. I forgot. I was like, what can we call this?
It's called the flex.
It's always done with Carl Weathers.
I want it
right?
to catch fire, though. Like, that's how I want men to introduce themselves to each other from now on. It's just like shake hands, but also flex at the same time.
Arm wrestle in
Yeah.
the air.
Yeah.
That's pretty
It's
cool.
hot.
I thought it was funny that Carl Weathers lost that because it was like a little pseudo, like who's tougher.
Yeah.
And
You thought it was funny that he lost
Yeah.
the arm wrestling?
Against Arnold?
Carl Weathers?
Like against Arnold?
Dude, that's Apollo Creed.
Like going against Conan.
And the lead of the movie.
And the strongest man alive.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
You've been pushing too many pencils.
Yeah.
He got that shit-eating grin on his face.
Well, you know what's funny is, so like Carl Weathers, he did this movie after doing like the first 3 Rockies, and he won't like everyone on this movie, like they'd get up at like 6 a.m. to like work out for like 2 hours before like the production started. And Carl Weathers didn't want anyone to know he had to work for his body. So like he'd work out like when no one was looking. And so while everyone else is like, you know, all sweaty and tired from working out, he's just like, oh man, like I got it easy. Like I'm just naturally like this. Like there were a lot of like shenanigans on set because like all these guys, like for instance,
The testosterone overload.
Oh, yeah.
so
Jesse Ventura.
yeah, so this was Jesse the Body Ventura's first movie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of advocated for him to be cast because he was like just a fan of having watched him on the WWF at the time, so basically like when Jesse got there, he was kind of like in competition with Arnold to see like, you know, like who could work out more.
Yeah.
And so they kept waking up earlier and earlier to try to work out before the other guy. And it got to the point where Arnold Schwarzenegger decided to kind of like put Jesse in his place. And so he bribed the wardrobe department to tell Jesse that his arms were 2 inches thicker than Arnold's. And so like the wardrobe department, like, you know, when they're measuring them for their outfits, they're like, oh, did you know that your muscles are about 2 inches bigger than Arnold Schwarzenegger's? And Jesse Ventura's like, really? and so like while they were working out one day, Arnold
Dudes are so funny.
Arnold was giving Jesse some you know, like some shade over, and Arnold's like I bet my arms are bigger than yours. And Jesse, you know, he's sitting there. He's like, I got 2 inches on you. He's like, I think you'd lose that bet. And Arnold's like, okay, let's bet a bottle of very expensive champagne on it. Let's measure our muscles. And so Jesse's like, you're on, and you know, asshole. And so like they measure the muscles, and Arnold's like way bigger than Jesse. And Jesse's like, God damn it. And Arnold's like, ha 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 ha.
That's
Like,
hilarious.
I told them to tell you your arms.
Gotcha.
But it's also funny because like at the hotel that they were staying at in Mexico for like the shoot, the hotel didn't filter their water.
Oh yeah.
And so everyone on the production got like traveler's diarrhea. They were just constantly shitting during this movie.
I can't remember what movie it was that Arnold was in, but at one point he had a movie that was out of the U.S. He was filming somewhere, and he had brought along his own personal chef, and everybody else was just eating the local food, and Arnold was like having his food shipped in from the States, and
I remember this
he's the
story.
only one who didn't get sick.
Yeah.
And that was the reason why, but I can't remember what movie it was from.
I think it was the one where Alyssa Milano is his daughter. Yeah.
I actually think it was Predator because
Was it Predator?
Because
I feel like it was an earlier movie than Predator, like before he got that famous.
I know that John McTiernan didn't get sick on set either, so they were doing something. But
Probably had his water bottled in, and
everyone had the runs on this movie.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Coconut water.
Yeah, Jean-Claude.
Yeah, but there's just so many like weird things about this. Like the guy who played Sonny, the big Indian guy, like in order to get insured for the production, the studio Fox had to hire a bodyguard for Sonny, not because
Sonny Landham played him.
Yeah.
So
I'm talking about the actor Sonny. So they had to hire a bodyguard for him, and it was like it wasn't because he was in danger of anything. It was because he was like he had a very short temper and he was prone to like getting in fights with people. So the bodyguard was there to protect everyone else from Sonny, which I thought was kind of funny. And like you just have this like pure testosterone driven movie. In fact, at one point, so my favorite scene in this movie is where Blaine, Jesse Ventura, gets killed, and Mac runs up, picks up his Gatling gun, and just starts firing into the forest. And then everyone else shows up in the squad and just starts firing into the forest. And Jude's sitting there. She's got this look on her face. She's just like, "This is such a bro scene."
It really is.
And I'm sitting there with this big grin on my face. I'm just like, "Yeah."
Everybody loves that scene, man.
Get that alien.
Let's just waste as many bullets as we can, shooting at nothing.
I love there's a line right after they raid that little shanty town where the hostages were being held, and they're like, everything's on fire. The place is freaking blown to bits. There's gunfire everywhere. There's shells everywhere, and they're like, "Let's get out of here. Leave no trace." I'm like, what do you mean leave no trace?
It means burn it down. But the thing I love about this movie, it's such a wonderfully well-written movie and perfectly structured. But that scene, like part of what makes this movie work is that the unit, the Dutch's, commando unit, their characters are so well defined, and it's done in such a subtle way. Like in any other movie, when Mac's firing that machine gun into the forest, you'd have people run up and stop him. It's like, "What did you see?" Like they'd want to know why he was firing it. These guys, just to show like how on the same page they are, they run up, they don't ask a single question. They just start shooting.
Yeah, they're like, "This guy knows what he's doing."
Well, they're like, he saw something, he's shooting something, we got to back him up. And that was what made the team dynamic in this movie so wonderful and crazy. And then once they get rid of all their ammo, like their guns literally run out, and then they stop, and they even take a few minutes to just wait and see if there's anything moving still, and then they ask Mac, "What did you see?" It's like they wait until the shooting's over to kind of start investigating things. And part of what I love about this movie is just the ensemble and how each character is so unique, but they don't spend a lot of time setting them up. It just kind of comes out naturally. Like one of my favorite characters, Mac, played by Bill Duke. When the chopper lands at the beginning, did you guys notice, as everyone's getting out of the helicopter, he's wearing a 3-piece suit? He's the only one in a suit.
No.
So Bill Duke steps out and he's wearing this 3-piece suit. Everyone else is in t-shirts and jeans and stuff. And throughout the course of the movie, he's shaving.
Yeah,
he's
got a little twitch.
He's always shaving. But if you think about it, Bill Duke's take on his character was "Oh, this guy's a dandy." He cares about his appearance. Even when he's in the middle of the jungle, he's making sure that he's clean shaven. And that was just a really kind of awesome character choice.
My favorite part about that. Sorry, go ahead.
I always took the shaving thing as a nervous twitch. It's kind of like a mental disorder. This is how he stays calm by
That's
shaving his
interesting
face with the.
My favorite part about his character is how he flexes on Carl Weathers the entire time. And he's like, hey, you fuck up again?
Yeah.
I'm going to slice you.
I'll bleed you.
I'll bleed you out, and you're just going to lay here real quiet. I was like, damn. That's like, he said it so calmly and just like low key, and it was like the most threatening thing anybody has ever spoken. It's like, oh my God, dude, that guy was going to mess you up. And then he did it again. He's like, hey, come over here. And then he stabs him in the shoulder with the knife when he picks up the scorpion.
Yeah.
He does that the whole movie. He's just like, he seems to be, I don't know, the calmest out of the bunch, but also the most menacing. And I dig that about his character.
Quiet killer.
Yeah.
I like how each character has like their own thing. Like, for instance, Hawkins is always trying to make Billy laugh by telling him these terrible jokes.
Yeah.
And those were jokes that Shane Black kind of just made up on his own. It's funny because Joel Silver, who produced this movie, like he wanted Shane Black to rewrite the script because Shane Black had just sold Lethal Weapon. He was like the hottest screenwriter on the planet at that point. And in order to get him to rewrite the script, because Shane Black read the script, he's like, this doesn't need a rewrite. And so he's like, how would you like a role in the movie, kid? And basically he cast him in that role in order to get him isolated in Mexico for like a couple weeks to force him to do a rewrite. And so like when he was down in Mexico, Shane Black was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do a rewrite. And he did a rewrite on the script and it was never used. It was just like there.
That's funny.
But yeah, so like he was cast so that he could be forced to rewrite the script. But then once he was cast, he was like, I'm going to come up with these jokes, and then like the whole thing is like, I'm going to try to make Billy laugh. That's like my goal in the group dynamic.
Yeah. About halfway through the movie, he finally gets it with the echoed one.
Yeah.
Why'd you say pussy twice? I didn't. Get it? Because it's an echo. And then he just starts cracking up. All right, let's go around the table. Favorite one-liners from this movie, and then we'll talk about the alien. MattVader. What's your favorite one-liner?
My favorite one-liner, like my favorite Arnoldism.
It could have been. It could be Arnold. It could be anybody else.
Well, I think
Could be a Macism.
the best one is the famous "Get to the chopper."
Yeah.
Get to the chopper. Yeah, I mean it's just
That's Arnold's favorite meme too.
yeah, it's great. It's
classic.
like that.
It's classic. I think mine has got to be the sexual Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah,
Bunch of slack jawed. I can't even say the whole line, but that
Strap
second half
this
was
on
like,
your sore ass blank.
like Jesse
Yeah,
Ventura's one-liners in this movie are on point.
I can totally appreciate that because I love it when 80s movies crack that barrier that no movie is allowed to crack anymore, and by simply saying a stupid word.
Yeah, it's good.
So-
It makes me. It's a good feeling to be just kind of let loose. Jude, what's your favorite one-liner from this movie?
I love that initial "you son of a bitch" before the handshake. It's just the handshake is my favorite. So it's the unspoken
Okay,
quote.
right on. And Kadish, you got a favorite one-liner from this movie?
Yeah, it's the part where Poncho and Blaine are kind of looking at one of the Russians who's like hiding in the jungle, and he's kind of fortified. And Poncho's like, Blaine, you're hit. And he's like, I ain't got time to bleed.
I got time to bleed.
Yeah, and he's like, you got time to duck. So like that I ain't got time to bleed line is one of my favorites. There's so much about this movie that I just find like perfect.
Yeah,
Like it's a perfectly structured movie. If you look at the first act as an introduction to the characters, and they set up the mystery of what happened, like what's out there in the jungle, and then the second movie, it's a straight up like Deadliest Game, which was one of the influences like for the writers of this movie, where it was like the Deadliest Game with an alien, and when they pitched it to Hollywood, it was like, this is Alien in the jungle.
Yeah.
So like the Ridley Scott Alien movie in the jungle.
When I was reading up a little bit about some of the stuff about this movie, what I found fascinating was they've put that little blip in the beginning of it when the credits are rolling at the start with the spaceship coming in around Earth and the little pod pops off. They put that in after. That wasn't part of the movie.
Yeah, that was a part of the test screening.
Yeah, and I kind of thought, man, that would have made a completely different take on the movie if they had left that out.
yeah.
And I kind of wish they had.
I
Because
feel like it was a necessary addition.
I don't know. I don't think it would have been. I don't think it's necessary
This
at all.
beast
It just
in the
would have
jungle.
given you a little different perspective on what's happening. It's
Would it be like a Bigfoot thing? Like this thing has always been in the jungle. We're just now finding it.
No, I would have thought, oh well, it's obviously some kind of alien. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, originally it was intended that the reveal of the alien hunting them was going to be like a big surprise. But us looking back on it, knowing like having a history with this movie, it's a bit of a different take because I think at the time when people were looking at the test screenings, the alien just kind of comes out of nowhere and they're just like, what? So like having it kind of set the stage at the very beginning with that opening shot of the spaceship going by Earth, kind of fixed that issue for the audiences at the time. But the great thing about this movie is like the third act, there's almost no dialogue in it. It's just Arnold versus the alien. And it's like the structure of this movie, the pacing of it. Like a lot of people kind of complain that the first act is kind of slow, but I feel like it sets up everything that needs to pay off later on in the movie.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think the opening or the first half of the movie is
it wasn't
perfect
slow
setup
at all.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that, so we all talked about how Jean-Claude Van Damme was supposed to be the guy who played the Predator. And it turns out that the original suit that they got for the Predator just didn't work. Like it was laughable almost. And so they had to fire Jean-Claude Van Damme and halt production for like 6 weeks in order to redesign the Predator suit. And this did a couple things. So first of all, Stan Winston, who was working on Monster Squad at the time, was hired by the production at the insistence of Arnold Schwarzenegger to redesign the Predator outfit. And basically at the time, Stan Winston was doing like a promotional tour with James Cameron for the movie Aliens, the sequel, because he did all the creature effects for that. And while they were on a plane ride to Japan, they were sitting next to each other, and Winston was like sketching out ideas for the Predator, and James Cameron was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I just got hired to do this emergency fix for this movie at the time it was called Hunter." And he's like, "We got to come up with an alien, hunter type creature." And so James Cameron actually helped him design the look of the Predator.
That's cool.
And while Stan Winston's studio was like doing this rush job on getting like the new Predator designed, production was halted. Arnold Schwarzenegger went off and got married to Maria Shriver, and John McTiernan was in Mexico. And because of all this downtime, he actually had time to kind of sit down and play with the assembly of the movie. And he looked at like all the weak spots, and he's like, okay, when we get back on production, we have to go back and reshoot this. We have to, film something to fill this in. We have to do this. And so he was able to kind of like look at all the movie's problems and figure out fixes for them, and also restructure the final act to make this movie as good as it was. And this was part of like McTiernan's genius early on in his career, where like he just was able to look at his movies and be like, okay, this is what I need to do to make them good.
It's a good way to do it. A lot of people change things up on anything they do. If they do something and then take a break, set it aside for a couple of weeks and come back to it later. It's like nothing's ever perfect. So.
That sounds like that's like something that all artists do, I think, for the most part. They'll have to step away from this for a minute and come back to it.
When movie directors, they have, it's like, well, here's your shooting window. You have this many days and this much money. If they can take a break 2/3 of the way through it and go back. And, that's why Disney does all these stupid reshoots and stuff that it's become commonplace now. Yeah.
Movies all have reshoot schedules.
Well, movies have always had like reshoots to them, but the scale at which they're being done nowadays, where they're basically reshooting like 90% of the movie,
right?
Like that's not normal.
Yeah,
like The Rise of Skywalker was just like a crap fest.
We're still shooting like 2 months before it came out.
Yeah.
Solo.
So let's talk about that alien, the actual design of the alien. I think it's probably one of the most unique and terrifying aliens that we see in cinema. Besides Ridley Scott's Alien, which I think is just terrifying by itself, just because that insectoid like thing will just hunt you. But this muscle bound like lizard like alien thing with the dreadlocks and the like mandibles that open up, like awesome. It's freaking crazy, dude. I love it, and I love the fact that it's all done in practical and like animatronic effects. That's like straight Stan Winston. I love that stuff. I cannot praise it enough.
This was an alien that when I first saw this movie in the theaters, I was like, how in the hell did they make this thing? I was just crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they had to hire this huge actor to play him, and because of the mandibles, like the actor didn't know what sounds the predator made, so he based the sounds that he made, like the clicking, popping, like
the actor came up with that.
The actor came up.
That's
with
not
that.
like post production.
Well, I mean, he did it in post production, but like he kind of conceptualized it based off of horseshoe crabs because of the mandibles. And he was like, I grew up on this beach, and the horseshoe crabs, like when you'd pick them up and turn them upside down, they'd make this like clicking, popping, gurgling
makes
sounds.
sense.
That's so creepy.
And so that's what they based the predators off of.
Wow,
I like it.
Yeah. That's a nice knowledge drop, man. Good.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff, like the way that they made the invisibility effect in the movie was like they'd shoot it with one lens and they'd reshoot it the same scene with like a different anamorphic lens, and then they would superimpose them on the top. So like the distortion effect is basically just like two different kind of lens apertures mashed on top of one another with a chroma key. And because of all the green in the jungle, they couldn't do green or blue. So like the Predator's chroma key stuff was all done in red and had to be like filtered out and then replaced with like the different aperture stuff. And it was just really interesting. Like the Predator blood was
the glowing green.
Yeah,
if it bleeds, it can. What does he say?
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
We can kill it.
Yeah.
Like those glow sticks that you break them and they glow up. Like it was just that mixed with like oil, or petroleum jelly.
Makes sense.
That's awesome. It's become such a classic, like
Yeah.
the first one, and they've tried to recreate it a handful of times, and it just doesn't work. I can't remember. This is the only one that I feel like is a good Predator movie, except for maybe.
I don't agree.
You like the other ones?
Well, this last one that came out was a big pile of crap.
The Shane Black one.
But yeah, the Predator 2 with
That's a guilty pleasure.
yeah,
Really?
that's a fun movie.
I can't stand that movie.
And I like the one, I don't remember the name of it, but the
Predators?
one where they went to the Predator planet.
Oh, with Adrian Brody.
Yeah,
I did like that movie.
I thought that one was kind of fun. I just like this whole world that they made, and I like how they kind of joined it up with the Aliens franchise. And
I think they kind of jumped the shark a little bit, but I do like the fact that it takes
there's
place.
some really cool like Dark Horse comics that are
the comics are great.
yeah, that kind of fill in all that stuff.
Did you ever read the comics, the comic adaptation of the second movie?
I don't think I have.
So like they put out the comic version of Predator 2 before the movie came out, and I read the comics, and the comics were like freaking brutal, man.
Yeah.
Like they were really good. And then I saw the movie, and I was like, oh, the movie's not that great. But like over time, I've come to like love Predator 2 based off of just it being a guilty pleasure film.
Yeah, exactly what it is.
Yeah, I never liked it. I thought it was kind of goofy, a little too hijinksy.
You fell in love with bad taste after you watched the second half of it. So
No.
I don't have any.
That's a terrible.
You ruined your
terrible movie.
Credibility.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like I had credibility anyway.
Yeah, you didn't like Goonies.
I don't like Goonies.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you.
At least there's no kids in these movies. God, wouldn't
Yeah.
that ruin it if a kid came out and just beat the Predator because the Predator was so incompetent that the kid was allowed to beat him?
That would have
There was
pretty bad, huh?
There was a kid in the latest Predator. So
Yeah. See, it was a bad movie too.
I've only seen clips of that movie, this
Asperger's
newest one,
syndrome.
and it
It's
just
bad.
I dragged
It's like, my
Jude to the
God.
theater for that one, and she spent like $200.
on booze.
Well, we went to a luxury theater, so she
They
spent
made me buy like some $20 bottle of water. And I was like,
yeah,
well, you
that's
know what?
annoying.
Just bring me the $300 bottle of vodka while you're at it.
All right.
she was like, Matt, I'm going to treat you this time. She instantly regretted it.
Let's wrap this movie up. Jude, do you have any final thoughts on this Predator movie?
No, I don't think so. It's a good flick.
Yeah.
Good 80s action flick that has a little bit of everything. It's sci-fi, it's kind of horror-y, it's action, it's got Arnold, it's got Carl Weathers. Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. That's a good way of putting it. Vader, final thoughts on this movie?
It's a 80s classic for me. Makes me feel more manly every time I watch it. Need a testosterone boost. Throw Predator in your VCR and have a good time.
VCR.
It's a very bro movie, as Jude
Yeah,
would
for
say.
sure.
It is.
It's very bro.
Yeah. My final thoughts. I'm with you guys. I love this movie. It's such a fun watch, and it doesn't matter when you watch it. You can sit down, eat dinner, and watch this movie, or have a drink, or have a beer, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's throw it in anytime.
And you know what's funny is like, it's a very timeless movie.
Yeah.
Right? Like watching it, like there's little hints that it was made in the 80s, but at the same time, it's like you watch this movie today, it could have been filmed last year.
It's one of those movies that if they ever decided to remake, fans would probably have a rebellion. It's like, no, you don't need to remake that.
There's no reason.
Leave it
to,
alone.
yeah.
So
like you say, it's an 80s classic, but I would argue that it's actually a classic.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it's a movie that you could watch it 1,000 times, and it's just as good on the thousandth view.
Where is this movie on your list of greatest movies?
Yeah. Please tell me it's better than Bad Taste.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, like it's just it's an incredibly well-made movie, and like I said, John McTiernan made 3 perfect movies, and this is one of them.
Yeah.
And I never get tired of watching this movie. I love it.
It's probably in my if I ever have to have like a top 3 Arnold movies, this one's right up there with Conan and Terminator. I think probably Conan, Terminator, and Predator would be my 3 Arnold movies if I had to choose.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Kill me.
I'm here. Kill me.
All right, before we move on to the last movie, we're going to let the audience know that you guys can go and support the podcast and also get some cool merch. You can go to saltynerdstore.com. That takes you to our Teespring account, which has some T-shirts, some stickers, and some cool stuff there. If you'd like to get some of our merchandise and also help support the podcast, you can go there. That'd be pretty cool. We'd appreciate it. And I'm sure that you would love your products.
I'm wearing my Salty Nerd shirt right now.
Did I miss the memo? You guys are both wearing Salty Nerd shirts.
That's recording day.
I wore my sexual Tyrannosaurus shirt
Okay.
today because of
I mean, your
Predator.
Jurassic Park shirt.
Jurassic Park shirt you wear every day.
I'm gonna have to. I have 2 of them.
I wear my
We
Salty
need to
Nerd shirt. I wear my Salty Nerd shirt on recording days unless there's a theme that I have a T-shirt for.
Ah, okay.
So
We need to make a T-shirt that says "Sexual Tyrannosaurus."
On it. It's on my list. Here, you guys want to see my list
No.
for shirts that I want to make? Look at that. Look at that list. I'm on the. I'm making His Name is Horace right now. It's on my computer. His name
was
is Horace.
from Monster Squad. I've got. It says his name is, and then a shotgun, and then Horace.
Are you making the "We Senor"?
Yes, that's on the list. That's on the list. It's down here.
I would
though.
never buy that shirt.
Oui, senor. With a cup of coffee, like a little pinky sticking out.
And a croissant.
All right. Last but not least, let's talk about Starship Troopers. This was my pick for this week.
Would you like to know more?
Would you like to know more? I love this movie. It's so much fun, and it's kind of.
Can I call your attention to what Kadish has been hiding under his hand?
He's got the book,
entire time we've been recording.
I noticed it when I walked in. He's got the novel, which I'm pretty sure is fairly different from the actual movie, if I'm not mistaken.
That different.
No? Okay.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah, well,
when we
I'm
get
sure you
into
will.
it.
For probably a good 45 minutes.
Yeah. I picked this movie because when I think of aliens and I wanted to pick something that was vastly different than what I picked last podcast. It's a cheesy action alien movie. And when I say cheesy, it has that quality to it where it's not quite like top grade cinema. But it's still really, really well done.
Oh, I disagree. Like this movie is very deep.
I
There are lots of different levels to this movie.
I'm not talking about like the concepts and the messages that it has. But I'm just mean like the filming itself.
Even
like
the way it looks and the casting choices were like very intentional because I mean Paul Verhoeven, the guy who directed this movie, very famous, very famous director who's big on satire and like we'll go into his choices when we dive deep into this, but like everything in this movie was just if you're familiar with Paul Verhoeven films, like you'll just realize like oh yeah, that's Paul Verhoeven.
I when I look at it, I don't know what it is specifically. I can't. Maybe you'll be able to explain to me why I think this, but when I look at it. It seems like it's filmed in a different way than most other movies. The actual quality of the film, most of the stuff is practical, except for maybe a few scenes with the aliens. But the outfits themselves, they feel very like homemade almost. The helmets and stuff feel very plasticky. I don't know if that's a conscious choice that they made. It feels fake almost. Like the football uniforms that they wear during the game that Rico is wearing. Like the football uniforms seem like something somebody made for a cosplay. It has that quality to it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. The whole movie feels like
Why
that.
don't you tell the audience what the movie's about?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So Starship Troopers is about Basically, it's a propaganda-esque satire, I guess, kind of movie where a young boy decides that young graduating kid decides that he wants to join the army to become a citizen, because in this world, in order to become a citizen, which gives you higher ranking and more rights and stuff, you have to serve in the army. Or that's one of the ways you can become a citizen, is to serve in the army and have a full term of service. And so he does
Do
that.
they call it the army, or is it?
It's the mobile infantry.
Yeah, the mobile
Yeah, that's.
infantry.
No,
Well, there's several.
The armed services. There's the
Is it? I thought it was like the armed forces or
Something like that.
well, they have
But-
different branches, just like we
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's a global thing, right?
Yes,
It's not just it's not specifically United States or anything like that.
So
the entire planet has come together into one.
Basically, it's the Terran Federation.
Yeah. Terran is Earth.
which is like a totalitarian or authoritarian government that kind of controls the entire world. And in order to get basic rights like the right to vote and stuff like that, you have to be a citizen as opposed to a civilian, and only citizens are allowed to vote and stuff like that. And the only way you can achieve citizenship is if you go into service for a number of years.
And at this point, this Terran force has gone up against this insectoid alien presence in outer space that has threatened their presence in space. And there's a war going on. It's an ongoing war that even these kids have kind of grown up in this world where it's just a fact of life that we are at war with these insects, and things escalate to the point where the aliens finally attack Earth itself with an asteroid, destroying the city that Rico had come from, killing his parents and everything. So he goes on this almost like a revenge quest to get into the army, join and fight and kill the aliens to get revenge for them attacking Earth. And it's all very propagandized. Like he falls right into line with what he's supposed to do according to this new government.
I love the propaganda shorts.
Dude, the propaganda is hardcore in this movie. Like everything that's seen on screen is directing this generation.
Are you doing your part?
Yes, it's very like World War II-esque, where like, hey, are you collecting cans?
I don't know what it says about me really, but I kind of enjoyed this whole world. I do.
That's scary.
It's very, very ordered. It's very particular.
Structured.
It's very structured.
Yep. You do your part.
I have no problem with having to earn citizenship to have the right to vote.
Wow.
That kind of. I really don't. I don't have any problem with it at all.
You're a Heinlein disciple.
Maybe. I don't know what it says about me.
Well, why don't you tell us about this movie? What'd you think about it?
Well, you picked it. You tell us about the
I just
movie.
did. I told you. I already said why I love the movie. I'm asking you. Do you like this movie? Or?
I love this movie.
Yeah?
It's a great movie.
What is it about it that you like?
I'm afraid I'm going to sound like a Nazi. But, I like a lot of the visuals in this movie. I like, the special effects. I like the bugs. I really like the space scenes. This movie kind of captures me from the very beginning and keeps me engrossed in the whole thing. They set it up. This is how you become a citizen. This is why you become a citizen. Then the planet gets attacked and everybody it's kind of their 9/11 moment, and it's like, oh, well, we got to join up and go kick some bug ass. and which, it came out before 9/11, which is kind of interesting to me when you think about it. But, I don't know. It's an interesting movie to me. It kind of plays on that whole patriotism thing, but there's that subtle kind of something underneath the veil of the story there that kind of like, I don't know if I should really feel this way
really feel
about
good
these
about
people.
this.
I shouldn't really, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't care. It's just,
This
is how it is,
The character and
I can't help but try to compare that movie to kind of where society is today and now. It makes you think about things a little bit different.
Oh yeah, for sure. But the character development in this movie is just so good. Like every single character that you get introduced to has their own arc, and it's fully realized by the end of the movie. It's fantastic. Like I think that's what makes it so engrossing, is because you're immediately like.
I think what it makes me think of is like, it takes me back to high school 30 years ago.
Makes sense.
And it makes me wonder how different my life would be right now because I was denied I was going into the Navy. I had plans from like my freshman year in high school, what I wanted to do, and I was done. And when I went finally to take my physical for going into the services, I failed for flat feet of all things. They just flat out denied me, said, nope, can't do it. And I was thinking to myself, God, I wish I would have known this, 3 years ago. I would have planned my life a little bit differently. And it kind of comes up to the things now. It's like, I'd be retired now. My life would be completely different if I had known that I had flat feet at the time.
Yeah.
And, it's just, I don't know. It just makes me think about things,
A little nostalgic.
Yeah.
Kind of like, wow, you put yourselves in his shoes, in Rico's.
Maybe a little bit.
That's pretty cool.
And, it's just the whole becoming a citizen thing, earn your citizenship. That's kind of what they do in Israel, right? Everybody has to serve kind of thing. And
it's not that they have to earn their citizenship.
South Korea does. You have to serve for 2 years.
It's not that they have to earn their citizenship in Israel. It's just that it's mandatory to be in the armed services for like a period of like 2 years, I think.
Yeah. Same
Something
thing.
like
South Korea is the same thing. You have to serve for 2 or 3 years, I think, in the armed services. It's a common thing. It's not unheard of for government to do that.
That basically came from Robert Heinlein, like when he wrote this novel that the movie's based on. He served, I believe he was either in the Army or the Navy. And he kind of saw the rise of hippies, and he thought that they were just a bunch of entitled pricks who didn't appreciate the freedoms that other people fought and died for. And so when he was writing this novel, he kind of envisioned this kind of militaristic society where you had to basically earn the privilege of being a citizen. And, I don't want to get too much into the book before Jude has her say on the movie.
Yeah, Jude, why don't you tell us, what do you think about this movie? Do you have any comments on it, favorite parts, or why you like it or why you dislike it?
I really like this movie. And one thing that I really like about this movie is the setup of just information, how they distribute the information, which gets you invested in each of the characters. Like you were saying, like each character has its own little story. And like one thing, and Kadish will attest to this, like one thing I hate in a movie is an info dump, just for the sake of the audience getting the facts about the world that you're building. And in this movie, they do it perfectly. Like the one kid is just like, oh, tell me about you. And he's like, what? I'm going to be a writer. I just want to know how to interview people. And so you get the story of why each person has decided to become in the mobile infantry. But also it gives you an idea of the world too. So the one girl is like, well, I want to go in politics. And you have to serve in order to be in politics. And the other character is like, I want to have babies. Yeah. And, it's easier to get a license if you have babies. And it kind of gives you an idea of this world and the rules of this world. Yeah. And like, as you go through the story, when characters start to die off, you're like, oh God, they had plans.
Yeah.
So I like that. I liked the investment that this movie kind of forces upon you when you're watching it.
Yeah.
It's a silly little like alien bug movie, but also,
really
there's so much more.
There's so much more underlying. Yeah.
And I wanted to say, because I was thinking about what you said about it, you kind of like, yeah, I kind of like this idea that like everybody has a role and there's rules that you have to follow. I understand where that's coming from, but I guess the hippie inside me is like, screw that, man. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. Like I have that freedom ring in me where I'm like, you can't tell me for sure yes or no whether or not I can have kids.
But then I just think of, because she just brought up the whole point about the one girl was joined up because she wanted to have babies.
Yeah.
It's like, how many hundreds of millions of babies get supported by the U.S. tax dollars because their parents have no business having kids? It is, I guess we're going to have a kid now, but even though we can't afford it, it sounds terrible. I'm sorry, everybody. But it's the truth. It's just,
there's a point
people
to it.
have no responsibility or sense of responsibility when it comes to doing those kind of things. And I think a lot of stuff should be a privilege. You need to earn that kind of stuff.
That all kind of came about with the destruction of the family unit,
Yeah.
Once that got destroyed, people just started popping out kids and they didn't have a plan for what to do with them.
Absolutely.
And it does drag on society a bit. I don't think that's a controversial topic to say. I mean, I don't think anybody has the right to tell you
I'm totally expecting hate from on my Twitter feed now. I know it's going to happen. You goddamn Nazi. How dare you?
Here's the thing is like, you really can't talk about the politics of this story without talking about the book and the changes that were made with the movie.
Why don't you tell us about the book, Kadish?
Well, first of all, the book was written by Robert A. Heinlein, which is he was one of the most prolific science fiction authors of his time. He was up there with Isaac Asimov and a bunch of other like famous sci-fi authors, and he's a big inspiration to me personally in my writing career, simply because he came up with a series of writing rules that I follow to the letter. He has like 6 rules for writing, technically 5.
You are a stickler for the rules,
6,
though.
Yeah. But
it's like Walter from The Big Lebowski.
The Starship Troopers book is so influential in so many ways that we don't even realize, especially for the military sci-fi. Like, it basically launched the military sci-fi genre. And in the book, the Starship Troopers are all decked out in power armor, and this is the first instance of a science fiction story using the concept of power armor. So like they're basically like Iron Man in the book, where they just have these like super powerful suits of armor, where they drop in from starships in orbit and like land and then like fight the bad guys.
And the book was first published in 1959, just to give you a perspective of when he created these ideas.
Yeah. And in fact, Vader, you might find this interesting since you're a Blizzard fan, but
he's very much influential in the StarCraft.
Yeah, StarCraft
in the Warhammer 40K world too.
Yeah.
So
StarCraft basically just cribbed everything from Starship Troopers, where they even use the term Terran Federation. All the humans are in the power armor, very similar to how
he thought he was going to drop a knowledge bomb on me. I already knew this stuff.
But the bugs in the Starship Trooper books, they were the inspiration for the Swarm. And then there's another alien race in the book called the Skinnies, which was the inspiration for the Protoss. So
the Zerg, you mean?
Yeah,
you're talking about the Zerg. But yeah, I got you.
Yeah, whatever the creepy like insectoid aliens are.
Yep.
But the book, I read it right after I went and saw the movie, and it was funny because this movie came out my freshman year of film school, and I went to see it in the theater with a group of other film students. So imagine going to a movie with 4 of me. and having to talk about it.
Oh my
afterwards.
God!
That was my experience.
It'd be a 4-hour-long podcast.
It'd be a lot of pushing the glasses up on the forehead.
Well,
actually, like we had a very lively debate because half of us hated it and the other half loved it, and I was in I love this movie half. But it was a very revolutionary novel for its time, and one of the controversies surrounding it is that it's looked at as a pro-fascist book because the world in which it creates it's a very kind of authoritarian society based around militarism and imperialism. But I don't actually think that's an accurate take on the book because Robert Heinlein is kind of famously libertarian in his political leanings, and you could read this book and think it's a kind of like far-right fascist propaganda piece, but it's actually kind of very middle of the road. Like in the book, the bugs are very obviously kind of an allegory for communists, and the idea that freedom isn't free. You should have to serve if you want to say in how your country is run, and the benefits of having a strong military in order to protect your way of life. Like all this stuff is explored in the book, and when the movie was being made. So Ed Neumeier, who was the writer for Robocop, he was the one who adapted this book into the movie. And he was a fan of the book since he was a kid. And Paul Verhoeven had never read the book before. And so in preparation for directing the movie, Paul Verhoeven got 2 chapters into the book and he pulled a Vader and he's like, I don't like this. It's boring and depressing. and so he went to Ed Neumeier. He's like, Ed, just tell me what happens. And so Ed kind of fills him in, and Paul Verhoeven's like, this sounds like a very right-wing fascist movie. Let's run with that. And so like basically, so Verhoeven was completely ignorant of the source material as he was like planning out this movie. And he kind of went in his own direction with it in terms of making it a lot more fascistic in the film than it was in the book. But the film actually kind of follows the storyline of the book like pretty closely in terms of like it starts off with this kind of like failed invasion of an alien planet, and then like it flashes back to Johnny Rico's days in high school and how he kind of went through the training to become this soldier. And it's more of a character piece than like a big space opera.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows like it's a coming of age story. It kind of shows his growth from a child to like a man and a soldier. But Verhoeven, I mean, he's so subversive in this movie. It's crazy. Like the very opening scene where we see Johnny in school with Michael Ironside as his teacher, and Michael Ironside's basically saying like, "There's not a problem humanity has ever faced that violence couldn't fix."
Yeah,
that's kind of like the theme of this movie is that war makes fascists of us all, and that violence is a tool to be used to settle all conflict in fascist society. And it's very interesting because the way that this movie was cast and shot. So like Paul Verhoeven very deliberately wanted to cast people who looked like they were out of like a teen drama, like on like 90210 or something like that. He wanted people who were young and beautiful because the society was kind of founded in eugenics, where like, you know, the undesirables were killed off before they were born, and you regiment who's allowed to breed and who isn't and have babies. And so everyone had to look like really like perfect and young and vibrant. And he shot it in a very flat way. Like he wanted it to almost look like a bright, shiny TV movie.
That's what it is.
Yeah. and like in fact, Michael Ironside at one point.
It's the whole reason why I picked this movie is because Michael Ironside is in it, and Michael Ironside is a badass, and he's also Sam Fisher. So there you go.
Yeah, but he's like at one point, Michael Ironside asked Paul Verhoeven like, "Why are you making such a like right wing fascist like movie?" And Paul Verhoeven, because like he grew up in like Nazi occupied, like I think it was either Poland or the Netherlands or something like that. And he said like, I wanted to show like the ideal fascist world where you have beautiful people, you have beautiful, you know, locations, you have great weapons, you have advanced technology, you have starships, and the only thing you can do with it is kill bugs. and so like it was kind of Verhoeven's, because he's a very subversive filmmaker. You know, we talk about, you know, subverting expectations with Rian Johnson and kind of
he
like
made that
like
terminology infamous.
Yeah, but as opposed to subverting expectations, like Verhoeven's very like subversive, like just period. Like his movies are so layered with subtext that kind of undercuts conventional thinking. Because you would think like any other director would take this material and show like the horrors of a fascist society, and the main character would eventually kind of realize that it's wrong and he would rebel against it.
No.
But the actual character arc of these characters are that they get indoctrinated into what this society is all about, and they become the type of people that the society wants them to become.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of like perpetual cycle where we always see like the older generation of citizens are all like horribly like deformed or like, like they're
I love that one
handicapped.
scene where like the guy's like, the mobile infantry is what made me the man I am today. And he's like got no legs.
Yeah, he's missing both of his legs. But like every adult in the society at the beginning of the movie has like some type of handicap or injury that they got through their service, and all the young people who are citizens or civilians are like just perfect. Like, you know, they look perfect. They got perfect hair. It's like they came right out of a soap opera type thing. And then throughout the course of the movie, you see them get roughed up and become more like these adults. And in fact, at some point, they take the place of the adults.
Like Rico's character development.
Yeah.
He 100%
becomes Michael Ironside.
He becomes Michael Ironside.
Yeah.
He even takes over the same squad that he was leading.
Rico's Roughnecks.
Yeah, Rico's Roughnecks, right? It was such a...
Yeah, and like at the end, you see like the new recruits in his squad. And
They're like 12.
And by the end of the movie, like all these characters are now like in the positions that their mentors were in.
Yep.
And you get the sense that the younger generation is eventually going to take over for them because they're going to meet the same fate.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like the ending of this movie...
I don't even think it would be an ending. It's just kind of, it continues on.
There's like 3-4 more movies after that.
Yeah, and I haven't, because they all sucked, right?
Yeah, they're all animated.
But the funny thing about this movie at the end, is like in rewatching it, I was like, I actually felt bad for the brain bug. and the ending scene is so hilarious because like Doogie Howser or Neil Patrick Harris he's using his psychic ability to kind of read the emotions of the brain bug that they captured.
Yeah.
And he says, it's afraid. And everyone starts cheering like, yes, it's afraid.
Yeah.
You know? And the poor thing's just like sitting there like, oh my God.
Freaking out. I mean,
I felt bad for the bugs.
really?
Yeah.
Not for a second.
Well, like if you really pay attention to the movie, humanity started the conflict because you had these Mormon settlers who went to a bug-occupied planet and took up roots, and the bugs attacked them because they were taking over their territory. And it's kind of implied that that was like what started this whole conflict. And so the bugs were only responding to the aggression of this society, which basically like in this fascist society, because fascism at its core is about the propping up of the collective over the individual. So you give up your individual rights for the benefit of the state, and the state can only do that by enforcing like authoritarianism. So it's very militaristic. I think the best kind of allegory for fascism I heard is that your nose and your ear aren't individuals. Like you wouldn't do something to benefit them over your entire body type thing. And that's kind of what this was. And so in order to perpetuate the society, they have to constantly be at war with something or someone. And so when they were expanding out into space, they were looking for stuff to fight.
This idea that like conquering land is this terrible, terrible thing that only a certain type of people do. I'm like, that's like just human history in general. Like you look back in history, it's always about who we're going to conquer, who we're going to take the land from. There's always going to be a winner and loser, and history is written by the winners. That's just a fact. It's just a fact of nature. Life. Yeah, it's human nature. It's a fact of life, and this movie kind of brought that into a new. And
I really kind of believe that we're going to keep on fighting with each other until we find that whatever it is out on some other planet out there that's going to bring us all together and have a non-human.
Yeah.
Well,
something to
it's
fight.
also funny because in this world, in the Starship Troopers movie, there's like extreme gender equality. Women, like they all have the like co-ed bathrooms and showers, and women do all the jobs that men do, and vice versa. And
Diz was on the football team.
She was the quarterback.
Yeah, she was the quarterback. But also, like, there's that famous co-ed shower scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite stories about the making of this movie.
Oh, I know where you're going with this one.
Do you want to do it?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Talk about boobs. Hit it.
There's
Hit it,
definitely some
Vader.
boobs. So, Americans kind of had a hang up about co-ed nudity, right? Tell me if I'm wrong here. And the actors were hesitant to film this scene.
Yeah, because everyone had to be like full.
Yeah, everybody full naked. And they were refusing to do it until they made a deal with Paul Verhoeven, who's very European, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, we'll film this scene, but only if you film it fully naked with us. And he agreed and did it.
So the director of this scene was naked along with all the actors.
Well, the director and the cinematographer. But it's kind of funny because like the world that they created, like there is no distinction between the genders in terms of like, barriers to what can be done. And that's kind of like what some people are fighting for, but it just feels so weird when you're watching it in this movie.
Well, these people are all extremely attractive people.
Well, not only that, but they're all like complete badasses. Like if you in our world that we live in now, there's very few women who make it into the Marines because the standards are so high as far as physical power and the ability to do this thing. Like there's very few people who are able to do it. Even men, it takes a certain type. And like when I was watching this movie, thinking about that, and I'm like watching all these girls are in the army, in the armed forces, and they're all complete bad. That one Dizzy was in the football team. She was the quarterback. Like these people are like top notch. There is no like that the standards are still high, but these people are able to meet it.
Yeah.
No
she
matter
immediately
what.
comes in and tries to take on the
she takes down the drill sergeant, kicks him in the face, and then he
But I mean, you also see the other women where like you have the one who tripped and accidentally killed that guy because she was incompetent with her weapon, and then you have the one who wanted to have the babies when they invaded was it Clendathu? So like she panics and she starts running away, and the guys have the opposite problem where they get too into it and they like
one dude ran into it,
break ranks and get like slaughtered.
Every movie we picked this week is like insanely gory. You notice that?
Aliens. They'll
Man.
mess you up.
But I mean, like this movie just has so many like aspects to it where you could really break it down. Like for instance, I thought it was funny that when they show the propaganda piece where the bug is slaughtering the cow, they have a big censored thing over it.
Yeah.
And but nudity is fine.
They'll show the news guy getting ripped in half.
They'll show like the aftermath of the Brigham Young settlement that got slaughtered, and it's just like bodies, like
body parts everywhere.
But we can't show the cow because of PETA. And
I don't think I'd want to see the cow anyway.
but also, like, the funny thing, like, for instance, the video where the soldiers are like, here's an M60 repeating rifle. Who wants to hold it? And the kids are all like, me, and they give them the guns, and the kids are all fighting over it, and they're handing out like live ammo and stuff like that. And it's
that indoctrination.
It is. And if you look at it at a surface level, it's just like a funny bit.
Yeah.
But if you actually like sit down and think about it for a minute, like, you can see how Paul Verhoeven is just like layering in like all this stuff. and in fact, a big influence for him was Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. And Leni Riefenstahl was like the head propagandist for the Nazi Party. And she made this, it's called like the pinnacle of propaganda, where Triumph of the Will was basically, it showcased like Hitler's Nazi Party, and it had all these like incredible like visuals to it that really made the Nazis seem like very powerful and very
plane
formidable.
flying over Berlin or whatever, and the shadow turning into the swastika,
and all the people lining up and all the flags and stuff like that. And so like he basically, Verhoeven studied this movie, and he used elements of it in Starship Troopers. And like on its surface, it's a dumb like alien military kind of action movie, but beneath the surface of that, there's so much going on in this film.
It's a lot of warnings.
Every time I see this movie and you see the little propaganda pieces, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool, but it's like I say it earlier.
There's that little twinge that you're like, this isn't a good idea.
And it's sad that some people look at the book and kind of apply what they saw in the movie to the book, because the book is actually kind of even keeled. It's not a pro-fascist story, even though like Heinlein arguably had like some controversial opinions, especially when it comes to race. Like I can remember I read this one book of his called the Sixth Pillar, which basically was about the Pan-Asians kind of conquer the world and conquer the United States. And there's a group of like American military guys who kind of get together and create a resistance, and they find a research base that allows you to target a bomb explosion based off of like one's race. So you can set a bomb to kill only Asians.
What?
Oh my gosh.
And stuff like that. And so like it was very like, oh, like Heinlein's racist, but like it's kind of like an interesting, science fiction concept that he was exploring. And oftentimes it gets misinterpreted as something it's not, because we're trying to apply our modern sensibilities.
Kind of like in Winter Soldier with the
helicraft,
with the helicarriers that target only people that are going to be problems
might be
the
problems.
future. Yeah, that's a little
pretty
weird.
harsh. I always like when I see these kind of things in science fiction books and movies and stuff. To me, it always comes off as a warning. Like, hey, this is what could happen. Like, that's the whole point of science fiction, is to see what could happen, in good or bad. And when I watch movies like this, and I'm like, it's a very like structured fascist type government, and I'm like, ooh,
there's a balance. There's
a bit of a warning there.
Well, it's also funny because like if you watch Robocop, which was the other previous collaboration that Ed Neumeyer did with Paul Verhoeven, a lot of those same elements are still there. It's a very violent movie, but it's also very satirical. And it's like Verhoeven has this weird kind of penchant, I guess you'd call it, of making movies where at the time that they're released, other than Robocop, they're not really appreciated. But then like years later, they find their audience. Like for instance, Showgirls. Showgirls has this massive cult following now.
Does it?
Oh, yeah,
it really does.
Yeah, and at the time it came out, it was considered to be like one of the worst movies ever made.
Still is.
Well, it kind of was.
Yeah, but that's Verhoeven for you. Is like on the surface, his movies aren't very good. Yeah. But the more you watch them over time and the more you dive into them, the more layered they are, and it's just interesting.
I've never thought this movie or RoboCop were ever a bad movie. No. I've always loved both those movies.
Yeah. We're getting pretty long-winded on this topic. Let's do favorite moments. Jude, you haven't talked in a while. Do you have a favorite moment or character from this movie? Is there something that sticks out to you as?
Well, I know that you all have said like what a badass you find Dizzy and how beautiful she is and how interesting her character is, and I think all of that is true. But for me, I found her so unlikable throughout the entire movie. I was like, God, she's such a freaking ball buster. No wonder. What's his name? Rico isn't in love with her because she's just such a bro through the whole thing. And like in my head, I'm having this argument with her, and I was just like, "Girl, tone it down."
Everything she did was because she was chasing after Johnny Rico.
Yeah.
And also, it was the thing that repelled him because the other girl, Carmen, she wasn't any of that. He was just like so like following her around like a puppy.
It's the opposite.
So I found her character to be very just like a bro, just like him. So why would he want to be with her? I just found her
in the book,
unlikable.
the character is actually a man.
Oh, there you go.
You just ruined that.
Yeah. So that was your least favorite character.
That was my least favorite
Do you have
character.
a favorite character? Is there somebody that you were really attached to? No?
No, not necessarily. Oh, you know what? I liked Neil Patrick Harris. I liked his
Colonel.
yeah.
So was he like really
Liked
a
his
psychic, or was that
psychic
all just a bunch of
stuff.
hocus pocus?
No, he was a
no, he was psychic.
Is that that's a thing that in this world it's
Hocus
real?
pocus? That was a bunch of hooey.
Yeah, I'm like,
that's the psychic stuff.
because
is in
if
the
you
book,
look
by
at
the
like
way.
what he says, a lot of the times it's very like generic. Like the bug is afraid. Like obviously the bug's afraid. Duh.
Well, he's like
It
Troy.
could have been angry.
He's a betazoid. So, you know.
Yeah, I guess. I found like the whole like line of like there's real psychics out there. Like that was a very like Nazi thing when they were looking for ways.
Well, you know, he pulled the whole thing with Rico that he
ferret?
did with his ferret.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
how
I
he-
felt like that was just training though. You could train a ferret to go do
No,
stuff.
but he psychically told Rico that Carmen was still alive and sent him down that tunnel to get her.
Remember, he said, "I don't know why, but I just got to go down this tunnel."
Oh, was that was him?
That was him.
That was Doogie. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I think they call him Doogie Mauser. Because like
Colonel Hauser.
yeah, like when NPH shows up at a certain point, he's in like full Nazi regalia.
You know the one thing I've
Oh yeah,
always
the black trench coat with the hat. And
yeah,
everything.
full Nazi.
Yeah, full
It's like,
Nazi.
yeah. The one thing I can't quite figure out in this movie is what the time frame is. It's like how does Doogie go from recruit
That's
to
years.
colonel? I don't feel like it was that long.
I feel like it was years.
I don't know, because they never really explained it.
Once
It's like, because you go this movie starts, and then you go back a year to when they recruit,
yeah.
and then you go back to the present when with the battle on Clondathu.
But that was their first battle though, right?
Yeah.
It was right out of
But I feel like it was a pretty quick progression from that into
Yeah,
the end of the
the
movie.
timeline is not clear.
It's
Is
like it wasn't any longer than like maybe a year.
yeah, maybe.
No,
I don't know. It depends on how long
so-
boot camp was.
what's the
I
timeline in
don't
the
know.
book?
I don't remember the timeline in the book. I think that it was over the course of a couple of years, because I know that in the book the training section is very long and brutal. Like they start off with like 1,800 recruits in the book, and by the time they graduate, there's only like 100 of them that actually make it into citizenship or into service or whatever.
That scene where he takes his lashings.
Yeah.
I was like, dang.
Yeah. Oh, that's something I wanted to talk about was the
corporal
scale of
punishment.
punishment in the military. Is like you can just quit, and that kind of ruins your life, or you can stay and take your comeuppance,
Yeah.
and we might kill you if you screw up bad enough.
I like how they just keep like horribly injuring people and then just saying like medic, like
Oh, he
the
breaks his arm.
the medical technology in this world
Yeah.
is so advanced where they can just like fuck people up. And
I mean, they completely
Mess people
rebuilt
up.
his
Mess
leg,
people up.
just sewed it all back together like a Star
Yeah, he
Wars
puts him in the
tank.
back to tank and
Yeah.
puts his leg back together.
He's got that weird liquid thing around his arm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this movie is really cool. I enjoy it. And I see a lot of the more controversial takes as more of a warning sign than I do of like, oh, that would be cool if it was like that. Like, no, please no. No, thank you.
yeah, it really
We could talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
it really is meant to be a warning against that type of society.
Yeah. That's how I take it anyway.
It's not meant to extol its virtues.
If anything,
Like,
if
I'm like, this looks interesting.
Vader's like, I want to live in that
Where
world.
do I sign up?
It's pretty much a lot of order going on. There's not a lot of chaos.
I'm the only one who gives a shit about the rules.
There's no chop zones
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
future Seattle.
That's
in this
gone
world.
now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but
I can't remember.
Like
never would have been allowed to happen to begin with.
Like in the book, they really kind of advocate for corporal punishment against anyone who breaks any type of laws or like public floggings and stuff like that.
It's a bit extreme.
I like it. I like it.
I bet it works.
There's countries out there like that.
The medieval times were great because these people stealing stuff. You put them in stocks in the middle of the town square and you throw shit at them. That's punishment. Okay, you don't do it again after you've been put in stocks in the middle of the city square.
Slippery slope, man. It's a slippery slope.
Hashtag defund stocks.
Yeah, bring them back. Public executions.
Oh, we're right at 2 hours. Jesus Christ.
Do it.
You can move to the country that does that. There are countries out there that do that stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh.
Feel free to, ship on over there. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening. No, you do.
You go.
You do it. All right, guys. Have a great night. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Remember, go to saltynerdvideo.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help support us. Get us to 500 subs. We get to 500 subs, we will do a live stream where we're going to do a giveaway. So help us get there. Tell your friends, subscribe. Don't forget, leave a review on iTunes if that's where you're listening. Do whatever you got to do. Help us out. We're trying to grow the channel. Let's do the socials around the table. Matthew Vader, where can they find you?
You can find me at MattVader74.
Hate mail goes there.
Yeah. Just send all your Nazi hate to me, I guess. I don't know. Whatever.
It's all a joke, people. Calm down.
or is it?
Shut the hell up, dude. I'm trying to help you.
You can send your Nazi love to him, too.
MattVader74 on the socials and Twitch as well. So, yeah.
All right. And Jude, where can they find you?
At I am Jude JuJu on the socials.
Right on. And Matthew Kadish, if they would like to know everything about cinema, where can they find you at?
They can find me.
Just come over.
Yeah. You can find me at Matthew Kadish, Kadish, and also kadishbooks.com. We just released a new mystery novel.
I ordered it paperback. Should be in the mail.
Ah.
Thank you.
I'm going to have you sign it.